Hey, what's going on, you beautiful people? My name's Tiedie. I hope you guys had a pretty awesome day today. My day's been pretty awesome so far. So today we're going to jump into another Cinema 4D tutorial. Today what we're going to be covering is this low poly rocket ship and space scene that I did do a speed art of about 2 weeks back at this point. For those of you who haven't seen the speed art, I will put a link on screen right now. It went over pretty well. A lot of you guys did ask for a tutorial on it, and I said I would do it. I've been putting it off far too long. Really got distracted over the holidays. So pretty much before I jump into it, I want to explain exactly what we're going to be doing so you guys don't like waste 20 or 30 minutes when you're like at the end of the video going like, oh, that's not what I wanted to learn. So pretty much we're going to be modeling the rocket ship itself, making the debris, making the planets as well, and then doing some sort of foreground, background blur as well. So it's just pretty much focused in on the center where the spaceship is, and then the optical flare in the center where it's sort of like where it's taking off of, and the space in the background is going to be added off in Photoshop. I couldn't think of what to say there. Okay, so we're going to dive right into Cinema 4D to do the modeling. So we're going to start off by modeling the rocket ship. Now, what I did for this one is I started off with a cone. This was pretty much the base of everything. The first thing I did was over here next to our object, I deleted the Phong tag so that when we render it, it is not a smoothed out render. From there, what I did was rotation segments, turn that down to, let's say, about 11 or 10, whatever floats your boat there. It's, once again, like with all my tutorials, it's completely up to you. I'm just here to give you guys sort of a guideline and walk you through my process. I want you guys to make something yourself. So from there, what I did was I adjusted a few other things as well. So the height, I want it to be a little bit more skinny, and then the top radius, right now it's set to 0. I also kind of want that to have a bit of a radius, because if you look at this image here, it kind of goes in and out and in and out and in and out as it goes up. So maybe bring that a little bit higher and just adjust it until it's like a shape that you like. Maybe even, bottom radius, bring that up a little bit. I don't know, something, whatever looks good. I personally think that's a great starting point. So from here, what we need to do is we're going to model these little bumps, like these different separate colored rings pretty much going around the spaceship. This is pretty simple to do. First thing we need to do is make the object editable by clicking on it and pressing C, or this icon up here in the top left, which you can't really go back once you make it editable. So whichever one you choose, I personally just press C on the keyboard. And from there, what we need to do is select this little live selection tool, have our polygon mode selected so we can select each one of these points and do whatever we want with that. And what I'm going to do right off the bat is go to the top, select all of this by just clicking and holding and going in a circle. And then once we have that, we can just zoom out a bit so I have a better view. Hold Control, drag up, and now we have this whole other selection here. And once I have that done, I'm just going to bring it up a little bit just so it's the size of this ring here. That's what I'm trying to create, just the size of that ring. So very, very skinny, very narrow. And then once again, hold Control and bring it up. And that way from here, I can actually go to my sizing tool and go to this green sort of angle, shrink it down, and now we sort of have this very first bump. And you want to shrink it so it sort of goes along with the rest of the spaceship. So now that we have that done, what I want to do is actually continue that one more time. And for those of you who are wondering, and I know a few of you guys might not be able to do this on your version or depending on what kind of computer you have, if you can't hold Control and drag up to do something like this, you can also right click it and go to extract, and you can do it the exact same way. So if you're having some troubles with that, that's exactly how you get over that. But once again, we're going to do that exact same step again. So we're going to hold Control, or if you can't do it, press extract like I said. That's a right click and then find it there. Bring it up just a little bit. And then we're going to do it once again after deselecting, bring it up once more and resize this guy so it's going along with the same sort of pattern, and boom, there we go. So now we sort of have this weird sort of, it's not exactly like the image, but it's kind of similar, kind of doing the exact same thing. And as you notice at the bottom, it's kind of doing that down there as well. So we're going to be doing that exact same method just here at the bottom. And if you do let go of your selection and you hold Shift and click again, it's going to continue it. So just making my way all the way around this shape, finding back where we started, and going from there. So what I actually want to do here is go to my resize tool and make it bigger, and just sort of bring it down a little bit. This is all personal preference. I'm not going to make the exact same rocket ship, just to sort of show you guys the method. I'm going to be basing it off of this image though, and yeah, go from there. Okay, maybe we're not going to do that. I'm going to select that, and I guess this is a great time to sort of show you the technique that we're going to be doing. So now that I have this selected, I'm also going to select these rings that we just made. So I'm going to go around, make sure I have all of these points selected, the ones that we just made that are going perfectly straight up and down, not the angled ones. And from there, we're going to go all the way around on each ring that we have just created. Really not much I can talk about here. Just go all the way around. Once again, holding shift when you deselect something, or sorry, not when you deselect something, but when you click off of it, because if you don't, it's just going to make a new selection. And from there, we're going to right click, go to Bevel, and just drag out, and it makes these sort of these little these rings all the way around. So as you can see, it's beveled it out. It has now made it more of like a 3D pop, which is nice, especially here at the bottom where it's going to be very, very visible. So now we have this shape here, and it's definitely looking a lot closer to this spaceship that we're desiring to get to at some point. It's definitely looking a lot cleaner, a lot more smooth. So the bottom is the next thing I want to focus on, because as you can see, it's got a bunch of stuff going on down there. So what I'm going to do is, once again, we'll go back to our live selection tool, use the polygon mode, and just select the ring here at the bottom. Not this one though. Just the ring at the bottom. From there, I'm going to extract it down and bring it in by shrinking the size of it. And yeah, it's just sort of looking more like a Christmas tree than anything else at this point. But I'm pretty much adjusted. I'm just going to shrink it down, bring it down as well. And from there, it's not looking too bad. We're starting to get that sort of spaceship look, even though nothing's textured or anything like that. We're starting to get that look. One last thing that I really want to do is, as you can see here, we have this part sticking out where it's sort of like the I don't know how to exactly explain it, but it's like where all the momentum's coming from, all the fire's shooting out. I don't know the exact name of the spaceship part, but we're going to make one of those as well. So same technique, go to the middle. We are going to extract that down, shrink it, and maybe move it up. That might be a little bit too down. Or what I think I'm actually going to do is select the outside ring as well and bring the whole thing down. Just because I think personally in this example that's just going to look better, especially if I'm able to shrink the whole size. Oh, the thrusters. I think that's the name. Okay, there we go. So now we got the thrusters sticking out of the bottom. We got our rings in place. This is the basic shape of our spaceship. And as you can see, that didn't take too long at all. It definitely was a very quick process. Low poly modeling doesn't take too much time at all. The next thing that we do need to do is coloring. And maybe if you want to add some more detail, something cool that you could do is maybe just like the same technique that we did at the bottom, is just extract this and then extract it once again, but make this part smaller. And then bevel this outside ring. Just a little attention to detail, because this is where we're going to be changing the colors, right? As you saw in the image, the rings all had different colors, and it's really cool, especially in low poly, since everything is so simplified. Just adding a different color somewhere, it's one of the greatest ways to add those different details, because there really isn't too many opportunities to do that in low poly. So when you can, I would definitely take those opportunities. So bevel that out a little bit. And boom, now we got that shape. So the next thing I want to do is actually texture this thing before we add the windows and the legs and all that. And the way that I want to texture it is, first of all, I'll just put a base color down for the whole thing. The shift that I made before was a blue, because blue is my favorite color. I'm sure you guys could probably gather that from my channel. Of course, make this any color you want. You're not going to be copying this exactly like I said. So I'm going to go for this nice sort of faded blue. When it comes to low poly, I just like to, have the normal color and then click off specular, and that's about it for all of my low poly textures. Drag that on there, and boom, there we go. This next part is a little bit time consuming, I'm not going to lie, so I might skip over it. If not, you'll get the gist of it pretty fast. So what we're going to do is select every single part, all of these rings. I'm not sure if there's a faster way to do it, but this is just the way I know. So we're just going to select every little point here on these rings. And yep, for every single ring that we want the color to be different. So if you accidentally click on something you don't want, you can hold Control, click on it, and it goes away. But like I said previously, holding Shift will allow you to just sort of click off, rotate, and continue making selections on whatever you want. So with those two things in mind, control clicking to undo a mask and shift clicking to create a mask, you'll be able to go around fairly easily and just select all the points that you need to do. So I'm just going to go around this ring, and then I'll show you what I mean by doing the other ones, and then I'll probably fast forward the rest just so you guys don't have to watch me do this process, which probably takes just honestly probably like 2 minutes, but you know what I mean. It's not the easiest thing in the world to just sort of like talk over. So once again, do the same process for this ring and the same process for these two rings right there. So I'm just going to speed this up, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys once this part is done. Alright, now that we have everything selected, we're going to make another texture. Once again, very, very simple. What I'm going to do for this one is just make it gray. I'm pretty much going to make the same thing as in my image I showed you, my reference image there. I'm just going to make it sort of, sorry about that, just sort of like a darker gray. Nothing too crazy. And of course, we're going to adjust these later if we want to do so. So something like that, and just drag it on to our selection, click off, and boom, there is our basic shape for the rocket ship. So the next thing that we want to do is, of course, you know, add some other aspects to this thing, like the windows, the antenna, and the legs, which is fairly simple to do. Shouldn't take too much time at all, especially the antenna. We'll probably start with that one, actually. So for the antenna, what I did is super simple. Grab a cylinder, bring the radius way down and the height up, and pretty much just drag it up because it should be directly lined up. And just adjust the radius until it's something really skinny that looks kind of like an antenna. And drag it down, and whatever height you think looks roughly good, which maybe a little bit lower, something like that, and drag on our material right there, and then same thing for a little cylinder or sphere. Sorry, pretty much just bring it up, size that thing down, put it wherever you want, however big you want. And for this, I'm not even gonna bother making it low poly, just because it's such like a small detail. I'm just going to keep it as a circle, put the texture on it, and boom, there is an antenna, I can't speak right now, for our rocket ship. So one of the last things we need to do is add a window. Windows are, once again, super easy. Everything about low poly is super easy if you just sort of know what you're doing ahead of time. And we're just going to put in a cylinder, bring the size way down, specifically the height. So it's just very thin like that. And from here, what we want to do is just resize it and just sort of line it up with a plane like this. So I'm going to bring it back and just sort of rotate it so that it's kind of leveled up. You just sort of have to eye it. You can, of course, change into your other view modes if you want to, but you're just looking at it from one angle, so it really doesn't have to be too perfect. Just slide it into position wherever you want it to be. And then from there, we do want to delete the Phong tag, like we did with our original cone, and bring down the rotation segment so it looks a little bit more low poly like. And then from there, I'm going to be adding our gray texture to the cylinder, and we're going to duplicate it by holding Control and then clicking on the item and bringing it up. That way we have two now. And for the second one, what I want to do is just sort of bring the size down, drag it out, and then create another texture, which is sort of just going to be like a very light blue, like glassy kind of look, something like this, sort of similar to the spaceship, but not quite. Drag that on there, and boom, there is our window. So I'm going to group these two by selecting them both, holding Alt and then G. That way it's put into a null, so if I open it up, there's both of them there. I'm just going to name those window, and I'm going to duplicate the window by bringing it up, bringing the other window up, and just sort of messing around with the size and placing it wherever it needs to be. So boom, there are our two windows. Very simple. Maybe even adjust some things here. So it seems that this one is probably sticking out a bit too much. But there you go. Like windows, super simple. Antenna, super simple. Spaceship itself was super simple. The only last thing that we have to do is make the legs. This part is kind of finicky, I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm not the smoothest person when it comes to making something like this. What I did was I just put in a cube and I messed around with the settings quite a bit. So what I mean by that is I pretty much just sort of made it very, very, very skinny. Maybe not that skinny. And just kind of did my thing with it. Pretty much did it all by eye. Tried to line it up. And then just sort of had the legs sticking out of the spaceship. If you want to, you don't even really need to use legs, but the only thing I would recommend is just having it on this main ring here. There's really no other spot to put it, but I feel like that's the absolute best place to have it. That was a little weird. So I'm just going to try and position it as best as I can. And then what I did from here is I inserted another cube. This one, of course, is going to be like the foot. And just size that down quite a bit. Try and get this into position. And like I said, I'm just sort of eyeing this whole thing. Especially with low poly, you really don't need to focus too hard on getting anything exact or anything perfect or whatnot. It's more or less, does it look good? Yes, then boom, you're good. And that's kind of why I like it. It's very chill, very non-technical, and anyone can do it. And that's why I feel like a lot of people really enjoy these tutorials, because it's a great way to get into Cinema 4D. And even if you're really used to it, it's a great way to sort of practice a lot of other stuff. So what I'm going to do here is duplicate these two, bring it over to the side, and just sort of rotate them. So holding shift, I'm rotating this one about 20 degrees, and then with these two, do the exact same thing, but the other way. And then even from the bottom, that looks almost perfectly symmetrical. I think the first two, like I said, I'm just eyeing this, so I'm just going to sort of move it over just a bit. And since we're not really looking from underneath, that's about perfect. If you want to add a leg on the third side, like I did in this image, go ahead, but you really can't see it once we add in the debris and the optical flare, so I'm not going to bother to do that right now. I think that honestly looks good enough. That's our spaceship right there. The whole thing is complete. So what I'm going to do is select all of it by clicking on the bottom, holding shift and clicking on the top object, and pressing Alt-G on my keyboard. And what that does is it puts everything into a null. I'm going to name this Spaceship. So now we have our spaceship complete. If we do a little render, there it is. We made it. Our image is looking not too shabby as of right now. So next thing we need to do is add the planet that we are launching off of. A cool thing is that if you've watched other tutorials that I've made, you could probably make it launching off of like a low poly Earth, because I've done one of those. It was pretty popular actually. A lot of you guys seem to enjoy it. I really do appreciate all the support. But we're gonna make a whole new planet. This one sort of looked like Mars. But I digress. You can make it however you want. So just get a sphere. We're gonna pretty big, not like too huge, but big enough so that you can see the roundness. That's kind of just how I liked it. Position it underneath, and of course delete the Fong tag because we want this to be a low poly. So under object, we're gonna change type from standard to Octahedron, I believe is how you pronounce it. I always struggle saying that. And bring the segments way up to about maybe 100. Looks pretty good. At this point, I'm also going to be adding in a camera. So let me just get into like a position that I kind of like. Something like this, add in a camera, and I'm pretty happy with that. So with the planet itself, what I want to do is not too much. If you look at this, it is pretty simple. Like I do have a displacer in there and whatnot, but other than that, I really didn't do too much. So what I'm going to be doing here is making a texture for it. The texture is just going to be red, because like I said, I'm just sort of going off of the other one. I'm not making this one too different at all. But hope you guys don't mind that. I want to stick as close as I can to the actual image, because a lot of you guys ask exactly how to do it, and then when I don't make it exactly those same, like some people leave questions and whatnot, so I want to do it like the exact same method, the exact same way. So what we want to do here is go to this little bend icon and grab in a displacer, put that underneath the sphere by dragging and dropping it right on top, going to shader in the displacer, and clicking noise. Now, if we go to the Object tab under Displacer, we can change the height, make it a little bit more crazy, and just something a little bit different so it's not perfect. This also makes me want to bring these segments up quite a bit more, just so it looks a little bit more bumpy, a little bit more intense on our actual sphere. Next thing I want to do is go to MoGraph, Effector, and random, and do the same thing, drop that into the sphere, and for this one we go to deformer, and then change it to polygon, and then we can change our strength and whatnot to however we want it to be, whatever looks good, whatever floats your boat, and of course all the numbers that you want to change are right here under parameter and effector. So we're going to go back to the sphere now, make this thing editable by hitting C on the keyboard. And from here what I want to do is go to our selection tool and our polygon tool, and let's see. Pretty much just select some random points all over wherever our scene is going to be. Nothing too far off, and this might not work, so hopefully it does on the first try. If not, I know how to fix it. And from here, what I want to do is just right click, hit bevel, extract this a decent amount, and then slap on that gray texture we made earlier. And if I click off, yeah, okay, it looks pretty good, not that bad at all. And then of course, if you want to change anything, you can go to the effector and bring down the intensity on some things if it didn't turn out exactly the way you want. So of course, just make sure you mess around and find something you like. If I go into the camera, we can see the it sort of looks like craters or something, or some kind of space rock or something like that. It's very abstract, very low poly. Another thing I want to do is the spaceship itself, get into position, sort of like a launch position, sort of angle it, maybe bring it off of the planet a little bit, and center it in the camera. Something like that. So we're gonna go with that for right now. Next thing I think I want to do is the debris. So this is pretty easy to do. I didn't even really change any effectors. I just put a bunch of different objects in an array and just sort of clustered them there. So what else I want to do though is change the title of this to planet. I didn't spell that right, but we're just gonna go with it. So to get the debris, what I did was I went to my object tool and added in a platonic. So what I did here was just sort of size it down a little bit, put on that gray texture that we made earlier, and holding Alt, I clicked on the array with the platonic selected. It put it into a sort of array of objects here. I don't really know how else to explain that. I dropped the radius down significantly, brought the copies up, and just sort of messed with the numbers until I found something that sort of looked like smoke or debris or something like that coming out of it. And of course, you just sort of have to put it into position, find something that looks good. And a lot of this will be covered later on in Photoshop, so it doesn't have to be too serious. And then I'm just going to duplicate it. Once it's duplicated, affect the size of the what am I doing? Affect the size of it, and just sort of change the array settings. So we're making duplicates and then changing the object that is being put into the array, essentially. So I'm going to bring the copies up. So as you can see, there's a bunch of small ones now. Change a bunch of different settings just until it looks right, and put it wherever it needs to be. So that from a distance, it just kind of looks like a bunch of random debris and shapes flying off. That doesn't look bad. What I do want to do though is just add in maybe one or two just big ones on their own, just in the back maybe. Something like this. This part is very finicky. This was probably something I spent the most time on, just sort of messing around with. Just keep putting them in there however you want to do it. There's unlimited different techniques. You're honestly just putting in as many of them as you can, and whatever you think looks good in your own opinion. And just sort of do that until you're happy with it. And then the spaceship, of course, you position however you think looks good. Just until you're happy with it, of course. So I think that looks not too bad for the sake of this tutorial. Of course, like, things aren't lined up perfectly, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, this is just for a still image. Of course, you can use these sort of aspects for games and whatnot if you want to make it low poly like Spaceship. That's perfect as well. But yeah, for the sake of this image, I think that is more than okay. So the next thing I want to do before we sort of bring this over to Photoshop is, let me just bring this up a bit, is to actually make the planets in the background. As you can see, there's more planets in the background and they're sort of blurred out, and from there we just sort of do the rest inside of Photoshop. So we're almost at that stage. So to do that, it's super simple. Just make spheres, bring them up in size quite a bit, move them off into the background wherever you think they should be, and from here all I did was delete the Phong tag and change the type once again to Octahedron, segments up, and then just slapped on the same randomizer and deformer that we had on our sphere. So I just copy and pasted that over, and of course uncheck perfect render if you don't want it to be perfect. Same with the plant, but we already made that editable, so it won't be. And then sort of bring it to wherever you want to be, and it doesn't really have to matter too much, simply because it's going to be blurred out anyways. So I'm bringing this one here, and I'm going to make the color of this one, let's just say green. I think that's the color of the other one anyways. So might as well just make it green, go along with it. Was it green? Well, one of them was green. So close enough. Slap that on there. That's kind of an ugly green, but of course we're going to change the colors later on. And if it really does bother you, make the colors whatever you want. This is totally your design. So shrink another one down by copying and pasting it. And bring this one there. Make a yellowish one, put that there, and then make probably a third one, just like I did in the image, and move it down, and make this one kind of like a purplish color maybe, and boom. There we go. So what we need to do now to make sure it's a blurred foreground and background is to add a sort of, actually no, what we do need to do first is create our lighting. This is the important part. I guess we should skip to that part before anything else. So what we're going to do for lighting is, like most of my low polys, we're going to go to this floor icon, hold it, and go to physical sky. From here it's going to add a bunch of lighting things, and we're going to go to our render settings, go to effect, ambient occlusion, effect, and global illumination. Those two are going to make things look so much more smooth and so much more beautiful. So under physical sky, we're going to go to our time and location, just sort of mess around with the time, find something that looks cool. Maybe like the start of the day. And then what I like to do is rotate the physical sky so that it's like coming from very weird, unnatural angles. And I'm just going to give this a render and see what we have so far. So not too bad. What I'm going to do is just sort of mess around with the physical sky until I find something I like a little bit more. I'd highly recommend doing that just until you find something you like. I personally recommend when there's like a nice shadow on one side. Like as you can see, everything is shadowed here. I'm just going to keep rendering around and adjusting both the time and the rotation of the physical sky until I find something. And then once I get to that step, I will let you guys know what we do in Photoshop. So after messing around with the rotation and the physical sky, I found that this is a pretty good angle, pretty good lighting, and I'm just going to jump out of my camera because there's one more thing we have to do actually before we do jump into Photoshop, and that is the blur effect that we're going to be doing by adding effect and then depth of field. So with depth of field selected, we have to check all of these boxes here that say use. Also probably go to, the basic tab, and let's see actually if I want to change anything. Maybe, maybe bring autofocus up to about 5, and then lens rotate up to about 2, maybe? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna go with that. And then in our camera that we placed, what we do need to do is one final step, which is also a bit finicky. This is just because this is the way that I do it. I'm sure there's a much better way to do this, but this is just how I do it. And in our camera, we are going to go to the Details tab and see where it says DOF map front blur and DOF map real blur. We're going to check both of these, and as you can see, we got these like extra boxes within our camera view. So what we're going to have to do here is mess with these end settings on both of them so that the boxes that we made are just close enough so that it contains nothing but our spaceship. So I'm moving it just so it's right about in front of there, and then the end side, I'm going to bring that down to about there. You might have to adjust your camera like distance back, just so it's like, just so that the spaceship is the only thing that's really focused on right there. So if I go back into my camera and hit render, hopefully what happens is, since the only thing that's really in the center of the DOF map front blur and real blur is the spaceship, hopefully everything else is blurred out. And when it renders, while it's rendering, it doesn't do anything, but once it's done, it'll sort of add that over top, and hopefully we get the desired effect that we're going for. And boom, there it is. Everything's blurred out except for the spaceship. I'm really happy with that. There's one more thing we need to do when we're exporting this, is go to Output. Of course, choose the size that you want to export this as. I'm just going to do 1000 by 1000. Just to keep it square, whatever settings you want, of course. And one very important thing is we want to make this a PNG with alpha channel selected. Other than that, just sort of name and select where you want to put it. I'm going to put it on the desktop as tutorial. And that's about it. So next thing that we're going to do is make sure everything is positioned perfectly. And just hit that center render button. And I'm going to catch you guys once this is done rendering and we are inside of Photoshop. Alright, so now we're inside of Photoshop with our image that we just exported out of Cinema 4D, and if you ask me, it does look pretty similar to what I created in the speed art. So we just have a few things that we have to change, a few things we have to add, and yeah, we are almost done with this tutorial. So the first thing we want to do is make a new layer on top of what we've just created, just to sort of add a bit of a flare, which we're going to edit later, just for a little spaceship here. So hardness on 0, brush size, whatever seems correct to you. And I'm going to start off by having sort of like a orange, just like a fade like that. And then in the center of it, I just want to have some white. So from there, we're just going to mess around with like the overlay and the opacity of it. Oh, wrong layer. Wrong layer for everything, actually. I put everything on the wrong layer. So let's try that again. 2 clicks of that and 1 there. So just sort of like a nice little bright flare, and mess with the settings on it. Maybe not overlay, maybe just keep it on normal and drop the opacity a bit. Something like that. We're going to put something over top of it because I know it doesn't look too great right now. Next thing, I'm going to insert an optical flare, which I'm going to have download links to all of the files that I do use in this in the description below. And if I don't, please just let me know with a comment and I'll get right on that. But I should by the time that it's uploaded. So what I'm doing is going and finding an optical flare. Of course, you can find tons and tons of these on Google Images for free. I just have packs saved onto my computer just because it's, you know, a lot more convenient to access it that way. So I believe the exact one I used was this one, actually. No, it was not. You want to make sure you use an optical flare that isn't like too overpowering, because some of them are just absolutely wacky, absolutely crazy. And you do not want that. Maybe it was this one. Definitely not that one. The reason I'm trying to find it is because I noticed when I was trying to do them before, it just wasn't looking too good unless I could find a really like a nice skinny optical flare. Something like this will probably do perfectly fine. So I'm just going to drag that into our scene and change the blending mode from normal to screen. That was an unnecessary rhyme, but definitely makes the video a much better time. So I just slapped that right where I want it to sort of look like there is, you know, an explosion coming out of the thruster, the word of the day, of course. And of course, you sort of airbrush out the edges with the eraser tool, if I can get the size right. And yeah, just sort of adjust the opacity of everything. And just whatever you think looks good, you just sort of do that. Once again, is your creation. Maybe even airbrush out some of these parts here. It doesn't need to be that intense. Lower the opacity a bit more. Whatever looks good to you. So we just have this explosion coming out. The next thing I do want to do is sort of add the space scene. So I'm going to be opening up a file somewhere in here. Packs, textures, and I have a nice space scene that I use for the other one as well. This one is absolutely beautiful. Slap that in there and just sort of resize it to whatever you think looks good. This is yours, of course. Do whatever you want, and I'm just gonna sort of have it like this, and set it to, let's see, overlay, screen, Probably screen would do a lot better in this situation. And then from there, just sort of airbrush out all the parts that it doesn't need to be on. So using the eraser, adjust your size, adjust your hardness to whatever you want, and just sort of brush it out. Of course, the planets are really easy to do. Maybe bring the hardness up a little bit more on the planets and just get the size right. Want the planets to pop out a little bit. And just sort of, yeah, just go over those. Unless you want the stars over top of them, but I just don't really see any reason why you'd want that. It's completely yours, though. Do your own thing with it. And just, yeah, it's just nothing more I can explain there. Maybe drop the hardness down for this one. And just sort of mess around with it until something that you think looks good. I also sort of want to drop the opacity on this sort of flare that's coming out of the spaceship. Maybe adjust some of this. And of course, this is something that you want to spend a lot more time on. I'm just sort of rushing through it and showing you the process, just because you know, I can spend probably like 30 minutes doing just this step alone, but of course nobody probably wants to see that, right? So once you have something like that down, of course, adjust the opacity. Doesn't need to be that intense. And then this is when we start to really mess around with the colors. So I'm going to make a new layer over top of everything. Change my brush to the color of black and bring the size of it way up. Not that big. About that big. And just sort of, you know, as you can see, there's light coming from the left and it gets dark on the right. So on the right side, this whole side, I'm just going to sort of make it a lot darker. And just change the opacity. Of course, you can also change it to like overlay or something, which looks a hell of a lot better actually. So I'm going to keep it on overlay, keep the intensity there. And of course, you can do the same thing on the other side, but with white if you choose to do so. Just to sort of say like, hey, there's like a light source coming from this side. And just sort of go around making sure the lighting matches, you know, what it's supposed to be like. I'm going to actually duplicate that and put it on normal and then sort of adjust it that way. Another cool thing that you can do is if you want, one of the, like my most favorite signature thing to do is under textures, I have this like old stock piece of paper. I feel like if you add this over top of low poly especially, it just sort of makes the whole thing look so much more like rustic and cool. And for some reason I've always done it. I always have liked it. So I just sort of put that over top of everything. Go to overlay, maybe soft light, and just sort of drop the opacity way down just enough so you get the texture and the sort of the grainy look to it. And let's see, next thing I want to do is of course mess with the color curves. So just sort of mess it around a little bit, bring it up, bring it down. Go to blue. This is my favorite thing as well, is to bring the top of the blue down and the bottom of the blue up, sort of get this like Instagram filter look. And just mess around with all the different curves until you find like a color scheme that you really like. Same thing with hue and saturation as well. Of course, you can change the color of everything this way to something pretty psychedelic if you want to do that. But I kind of like this kind of look here where it's more bluish on the spaceship and in space. And then I always like to bring down the saturation, like all of this, just mess around with it for as long as you can. The optical flare, I feel like I could have done a bit better, but other than that, like there is not much more that I can explain. Like this is looking pretty similar to that in many ways. Other than the optical flare and the positioning of the debris, pretty much everything else is similar. Like that is the exact method that I used to make this spaceship. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, hopefully you guys learned something from this tutorial. If you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you're new, especially if you did use this. I would love to see your creations on Twitter, so make sure to follow me on Twitter and send me what you guys made in, on Twitter. That'd be amazing. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you guys learned something, and I will catch you in the next video. Have a great day.